So we're just going to try to summarize with some interesting themes from today and kind of tie it all together, hopefully.
Yeah, and I only have 10 pages of notes to share. No.
I have half a page, so you definitely beat me there.
Between us, we should be okay. We heard a lot about interesting use cases, starting, I think, with Commissioner Johnson talking about SupTech, which is the first time I've heard that. For those who weren't here, it's supervisory technologies, how agencies like the CFTC are using AI.
I like that. We might trademark that.
Yeah. Yeah. So SupTech, and then of course Virginia, and then small business. So some very interesting use cases for AI.
It's hard to talk about any of this in the abstract sometimes. So the use cases, and it was really interesting to hear about the use cases on the small business side too. That's an area where I don't think most people in the room really think about that much at all. About if you run a 2-person business, how can you all of a sudden be closer to a 5-person business? So those use cases for me were the most surprising.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting, the small business uses. We talked a lot about what are the comparative advantages of AI versus humans. AI tends to be efficient, fast, responsive, fair. I thought that was interesting because we don't always think of that. But Carrie talked about the incarcerated person who emailed him and is just waiting and waiting for his case to be heard. And so there's you avoid the human element of the, different ALJs will make very different decisions based on the same facts and favoritism that, of course, we see in different governments. So that was interesting and a useful tool for screening. I think there was a lot of that.
So Bridget's talk on the generative side of things, do you lose something when you have a machine generate? Do you lose the process of a reasoning through and really thinking more deeply about something? That was very thought-provoking for me, honestly, because one of the ways I think about the AI landscape is that generative AI is sort of, in the name. And so that it's becoming so much cheaper to generate things. And they're really good things usually for using it for memos, even contracts, generating like basic contracts, generating marketing, generating sales conversations, generating customer support conversations. All of that is working very well and increasingly so. Like just over the past 3 months, I've noticed that on a lot of the benchmarks, all of those things are that much better. So I think about the AI landscape is around generative AI and then the ability to review that AI, to add a lot of expert, high stakes, in many cases, 3 nines of reliability of looking at that stuff and reviewing that stuff. That's just personally, and I mean, business-wise, that's how we position Norm actually is one way thing was discriminative AI. That's probably not the right terminology. That's not the branding for this. But that's one way of thinking about it is you have generative AI and then you have discriminative AI or discriminative humans and experts that are looking at the output. But it was a really good point about maybe you lose something in the generative process if you don't have a human involved there. And I think one of the challenges for humanity at this point, just given how broadly generative AI is being developed and deployed, is how do you maintain the good things about what happens when we are part of the generative process, but then at the same time realize that it's now really cheap to generate a lot of things very high quality, and the sort of economic basis of attraction of that occurring and being widely deployed is that people are going to do that. And it's going to be happening all over the place. And how do you strike that right balance? So that was, for me, something I was thinking about a lot throughout the day.
And it's certainly something we think about in academia. Are students losing the reasoning ability that Bridget talked about that comes with the thinking and the writing? So I think that's important. Other things that humans are better at, I mean, we talked about legitimacy, accountability. You still want to be able to talk to a human if you don't like, a decision that the government handed down to you.
Yeah, and human in the loop, that was obviously a big theme. And the way I think about it is there's always a human in the loop. It just depends on what exactly you mean by that. Is the human looking at every output? If so, then the efficiency play isn't really there. Is the human looking at certain outputs that are anomalous? Is it looking at outputs where there's enough self-awareness of the AI to say, I'm not certain about this, or this represents a judgment call, and so I need a human? So the way I think about it is the systems to be able to direct increasingly scarce with respect to how much generative AI is occurring, human judgment and human time and human oversight, the systems to direct that in a useful way, that is extremely important. So whoever's building those for different areas of human judgment domain, that's an important thing to be working on.
And we this is a question I really have for you. We talked about untapped potential, but we didn't talk a lot about the pace. You and Jordan did a little bit. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe it's hard to
Yeah.
even talk about it in terms we can think it through. But
Yeah, no, it's really hard to grok the pace. It's crazy because there's a wide distribution of potential outcomes. And if there's a chance where it's about 10% every year, it keeps getting better. Let's say you take a bunch of benchmarks for what AI can do on answering exams, on the bar, a bunch of important professional licensure exams as well is a good benchmark. And then you say it gets 10% better every year. And then that's one potential. That's not what we've seen. We've seen over the past 3 years, it's getting 100% better every year. So if we continue at the pace we're on now, and AI gets 100% better every year on a lot of different benchmarks, and then the scope of the benchmarks keeps expanding too for new tasks and new types of domains, that's a part of the distribution that no one knows what would happen. No one knows how to govern that. No one knows the implications for the labor market, for the economy in general. And so I think that's why we really are in a really unique moment in time where the zone of uncertainty on a going forward basis over the next 3, 5, 10 years is massive. It's a massive distribution of what could occur. And so I think it's one of the themes that today is thinking about what are things that are robust under different scenarios, and what are governance frameworks that would be sort of no regrets moves. But I think no matter what, there's more uncertainty than there's ever been in technological innovation than there is right now.
yeah, and that, I mean, gets to the topic we didn't talk a lot about by design, which is regulation of AI. And I thought it was interesting. I did hear a theme from Commissioner Johnson and also on your discussion just now, is that we have the tools in place in a lot of ways, that a lot of our laws are technology neutral and that we can use them to address concerns like privacy and some of these other concerns that we have. And where we should be targeting is on these unique harms that AI may pose that other approaches to things don't. I thought that was quite interesting and consistent with things that I've been thinking about too.
Yeah, in the example that was brought up around autonomous vehicles and how they are held to a higher standard of care than a human driver, right? And so I think that's one of the main distinctions around regulating AI versus regulating humans, is that it's basically held to a higher standard of care. And I think that there's some like solid motivations for that. One being that it's just more scalable. Like if one little thing goes wrong, and then you can just scalably replicate that problem across the whole society, that's a problem. But I agree. I mean, that's been a good theme throughout the day, or a theme has been that there's a lot of existing laws and regulations that are extremely applicable. And then the question is, where's the gap between AI and that, and then how to effectively implement that gap.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I guess my final thought is that I was interested. There did not seem to be a left. We tried to bring people here to speak from across the political spectrum, different disciplines, different expertise, and I didn't see a left-right divide at all in both evaluating government use or evaluating regulation of AI.
Yeah, I don't think we saw much of that. I think the last conversation, naturally, with a business person in a trade association that represents businesses, was more on the side you could interpret it as like, oh, that was more deregulatory approach. But I think it's a very reasonable conversation, and I think that in general, this group of people that's here is thinking about this stuff very deeply from more of an academic lens, and I think that's very apartisan. So it's been really intellectually stimulating day for sure.
I have one final thing to say. Did you have other themes you wanted to touch on before we?
Let me see. I haven't looked at my notes here. Well, I mean, yeah. One other thing is just this idea of just kind of expanding the possibilities with AI. So I think that's another interesting theme where it's, the small business is now 5 people instead of 2, or it's the large company that's able to do things they never would have innovated on before. And then on the regulatory side, the idea that there's so much unmet constituent demand for services or for discussions or for being able to interact with the government. There's an insane amount of unmet demand that constituents have of their government. And so, yeah, it's maybe, to Carrie's point, it's like, compared to what? Compared to not getting service, compared to not being able to have your government help you in a way you want them to help you. Compared to that, it's a not perfect chatbot is better than that. I don't know. And so I think thinking about expanding the boundaries of what government can do, what our society and economy looks like, and thinking about more of an abundance mindset rather than an allocation between a fixed pie, I think that's a very productive way of thinking about AI.
I like that as our concluding theme. So all I'll do is I'd just like to say we in the Regulatory Studies Center enjoyed working with you and AI on this. And I just want to thank a few people. So Bryn Edwards, I don't know if she's in here now.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Bryn.
Yes. Lisette Vaccarano. So Bryn is with Norm AI. Lisette Vaccarano and Nate Thompson with the GWU Regulatory Studies Center, and the whole team of policy analysts and students who helped out greeting you and also took notes. So we plan to, they're going to be writing short summaries of each of the sessions. So stay tuned for that. And if you don't already subscribe to the Regulation Digest, you should. So contact Nate if you don't and want to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.